يعني دون الإطالة اللي صار ب4 آب 2020، الكل بيعرف حجم الانفجار، عدد الإصابات الكبير، عدد الدمار والكلفة الكبيرة اللي كانت على المجتمع اللبناني وعلى الدولة اللبنانية، الأضرار على كل المستويات. من اللحظات الأولى لهذا الانفجار كان واضح، بلش تتسرب لوسائل الإعلام وجود وثائق رسمية كانت تتحدث عن وجود هذه المادة المخزنة بمرفأ بيروت. وصلت على مرفأ بيروت، تم تخزينها لسنوات طويلة ودون أن يستطيع أحد على الرغم من المراسلات أن يتعاطى معه. من الناحية القانونية هنالك واجب لحماية الأشخاص وداخل مجتمعاتهم. تأمين الحماية والحق بالحياة هو أحد أهم الأسس بهذا الإطار، وكان واضح ربما سريعا أنه استشف الحاجة لدعم أو لخبرات أخرى للتعاطي مع هذا الملف بهذه الضخامة. من تقريبا أوائل آب، يعني أقل من أسبوع بعد انفجار المرفأ، كان في 30 خبير بالأمم المتحدة أكدوا على ضرورة حماية التحقيق من أي تأثير غير ضروري، ومنح الضحايا الفرصة للوصول إلى العدالة، ومنح ولاية قوية واسعة للتحقيق. وعرضوا خبرات المجتمع الدولي أو المنظمات الدولية بهذا المحل. إذن الخوف أو التخوف مسألة ثبتت منذ اللحظات الأولى والأيام الأولى لهذا الانفجار. واضح أنه هذا التحقيق ما استوفى المعايير الدولية. واضح لحد هلا أنه في توثيق من كثير منظمات، من هيومن رايتس ووتش، من منظمة العفو الدولية، من لجان حقوقيين محليين وخارجيين. في شوائب عديدة كانت موجودة بالتحقيق الدولي، وأهالي الضحايا من الأول كانوا عم بيعبروا عن تخوفهم من عدم ثقة أو عدم، خلينا نقول، في ارتياب من الآليات المحلية لتحقيق العدالة. وهذا عم نحكي بالمسارات الأولى قبل ما نوصل للي صار بالأشهر الأخيرة. نحن بكل بساطة لنقيم الوضع بشكل شد واضح بعد مرور أكثر من سنوات على الانفجار. نحن ليس لدينا موقوف، تحقيق معطل، خلافات قضائية، وربما لا نقول انقسام بالجسم القضائي بقدر ما في تعطيل كامل للجسم القضائي. وبالتالي بهيدا الموضوع بيصير طرح تحقيق دولي، لجنة تحقيق دولية، أمر ملح وسؤاله أكثر من مشروع، والآليات اللي ممكن تنظم هيدا الشيء تحديدا بظل الإخفاقات اللي أدت للانفجار، الإخفاق في إدارة الملف والإخفاق في تأمين العدالة لأهالي الضحايا. وطلع أكثر من بيان وقعته منظمات وعائلات الضحايا وعدد من الأفراد. ربما أهم أو أول كان ما صدر ب 15 حزيران 2021 بهذا الإطار. وللحديث عن هذا الموضوع بسرني استضيف لما فقيه، وهي مديرة قسم الشرق الأوسط بهيومن رايتس ووتش ومتابعة منذ الأيام الأولى لهذا الملف، لنحكي شوي على العنوان كيف نصل إلى العدالة على المستوى الدولي بهذا الإطار. وكمان آية مجدوب، نائبة مدير قسم الشرق الأوسط وشمال أفريقيا منظمة العفو الدولي. بشكر حضوركم لما وآية. وخلوني بالبداية بلش معك لما. بتقولي بإحدى المقابلات أو إحدى المقالات أنه قد يكون لبنان حاليا بلا قيادة، لكن هذا لا يعني أننا لا نستطيع أن نحمي حقوق الإنسان. الإخفاق الجسيم في توفير العدالة بانفجار بيروت ما رح يؤدي إلا إلى تقويض الاستقرار وسيادة القانون. وبتغني وبتقولي لم يعد الصمت خيارا. بكل بساطة، هل التخوف من التحقيق او من الوصول الى العداله هو بالاساس كان في تخوف عندكم بسبب وضع الجسم القضائي بشكل عام ووضع حقوق الانسان في لبنان، ان هذا الامر مرتبط فقط بالتعقيدات اللي طالت الملف بعدين؟ هل كان في خوف اساسي منذ انفجار 4 آب على انه هذا التحقيق قد لا يصل الى نتيجه؟
Thank you, Ali. Ali, I'm going to give my remarks in English just so I can be more precise. From day one after the explosion, we had concerns about the domestic investigation that was moving forward. There was a decision to move the investigation to the Judicial Council. The Judicial Council is an exceptional body that does not meet fair trial standards. There are concerns around the independence of the body and political interference in the body, and also due process concerns. This was happening in a context where we and other groups have been documenting for years impunity for serious crimes in Lebanon. So it comes at the backdrop of decades of serious violations taking place without perpetrators being held accountable. So immediately after the explosion happened, we started to raise these concerns with the international community, and we started to identify some of the ways the international community could support a domestic proceeding. And I think this point is very important to underline. We're not talking about a domestic investigation or an international investigation. You can have an international investigation that supports a domestic proceeding. And the ability to shine a light on the truth through an international fact-finding mechanism can do many things to support a domestic proceeding, including by gathering and preserving evidence. This is a crime. As days, weeks, years go by, there is an erosion of evidence. Witnesses do not have the same recall that they have of events immediately after they take place. So there is an urgency to act here. And this is why we have been, along with a full range of civil society organizations, victims' families, other concerned people, really continuing to draw the importance of accountability for this explosion. It is not just because of the violations that were perpetrated on August 4. It is because we know that the impunity and the corruption that led to the explosion on August 4 are the very two causes of undermining the stability in Lebanon today and putting us on a trajectory that is only going to result in more rights abuse.
شكرا لما على الإضاءة على المشاكل البنيوية والأساسية الموجودة بلبنان. قبل ما نرجع نفوت بالتفاصيل لاحقا شو اللي ممكن ينعمل وكيف ممكن ينعمل، سؤالي بدي وجهه لآية. آية مجدوب، حضرتك بتقولي السلطات اللبنانية مارست لم تحترم القانون، تجاوزت بلا خجل تحقيق جنائي مستمر وانتقمت من قاضي كان يؤدي وظيفته. من الواضح أن السلطات اللبنانية مصممة على عرقلة العدالة منذ الانفجار. أوقفوا التحقيق المحلي مرارا وتكرارا، حموا أنفسهم من المساءلة على حساب الضحايا في معرفة الحقيقة والعدالة والأنصاف. آية، بعرف أنه يمكن كثير بينحكى بالموضوع، بس ربما بحاجة لنذكر إذا لما حكيت لنا عن الثغرات الجوهرية البنيوية بالنظام المحاسبي في لبنان، ما هي أهم المشاكل وكيف تراكمت المشاكل لوصلنا لما وصلنا إليه بحيث تعطل التحقيق بشكل كامل منذ أشهر؟ ليش وصلنا لهم؟
شكرا علي. من أول نهار ونحن عم نوثق انتهاكات بهذا التحقيق، أول شيء كان في كتير خلل بطريقة يلي استدعوا على التحقيق وانحبسوا الأشخاص يلي هلأ طلعوا، بس اللي أول شيء كانوا charged بالقضية. تاني شيء هو الكود اوف كريمنال بروسيجر تبع المجلس العدلي في كذا محل فيه ما بيطابق القوانين والمعايير الدولية. مثلا القانون بيقول انه المحقق العدلي قوانينه مش قابله لاي نوع من الابيل. نسيت تعرفون بالعربي ايش يعني
الطعن او
الطعن. نعم. اكيد هو هلا القاضي طارق بيطار طلع يعني قاضي اكيد كلنا بنحترمه، بس باي مسار قضائي لازم يكون في طريقه انه ناس تقدر تطعن بقرارات القاضي. تاني مشكله بالمجلس العدلي انه ما في اي قيود على قد ايه الاشخاص فين يقعدوا بالحبس الاحتياطي. وهيدي بنعرف هيدي هلا كمان أدت لكتير مشاكل. بس كمان هو من يعني ما بيتماشى مع المعايير الدولية إنه يقعدوا ناس أكثر من 2 سنين بالحبس بحبس احتياطي وبعد ما في أي تاريخ محدد لجلسة محاكمتهم. بس غير عن هدول الأشياء يعني مكونات المجلس العدلي اللي نحن كان وقتها عنا مشاكل فيها، شفنا كيف السلطات اللبنانية ضلت تتدخل بمجرى التحقيق. يعني أول شيء شفنا كيف لما القاضي صوان بلش اتهامات ضد السياسيين، شفنا كيف طيروا للقاضي صوان. بعدين بس بلش بنفس الشغل القاضي بيطار، كمان شفنا حملات التخوين ضد القاضي بيطار. شفنا المعلومات الكاذبة اللي كانت عم تنشر عن القاضي وعن انه هو عم يندفع له من السفارات وانه هو عم يشتغل للسفارة الأمريكية. شفنا كتير كمان أخبار كاذبة عن القاضي بيطار. شفنا كمان كيف أدى هول المعلومات أدوا لمشاكل بالطريق، أدت لأحداث الطيونة يلي مات فيها 7 أشخاص. بعدين شفنا كيف استعملوا الجهات السياسية اللي صار بهذا النهار ليرجعوا كمان يقولوا إنه القاضي طارق بيطار دم على إيده وهو عم يجري البلد لحرب أهلية. وكل هذا بجنب. بعدين كمان شفنا legal challenges، يعني طلبات الرد ولا طلبات الرد يلي كانت عم تتقدم من السياسيين اللي هن متهمين بهيدي القضية. كمان هذا أدى لوقف التحقيق لمدات طويلة. شفنا بعدين وقتها كان في قاضي جرب ياخد، قاضي مزهر جرب ياخد التحقيق. يعني كان في كتير اشياء عم تصير مش مطابقه للقانون، وفيها شفنا انه كل البوليتيكال كلاس، كل الاستابليشمنت كانوا واقفين مع بعض ضد هذا التحقيق وضد القاضي لما بلش القاضي يتهم السياسيين.
شكرا آية على هذا الإيجاز. سؤال للما وقبل ما أرجع كمان لآية بنفس هذا الموضوع، بعد كل اللي صار لما فقيه، هل بعد فينا نراهن على إمكانية أن التحقيق المحلي يوصل لنتيجة؟
Ali, this is a very important point. We cannot give up on domestic judicial proceedings. There is no external independent investigation that will replace the importance of a domestic proceeding. But are we willing today to say if a domestic proceeding is not going to move forward, then we will accept that we will never know who was responsible for the blast and no one will be held accountable? No, we're not. You know, at an individual level and on a countrywide level, we cannot accept this result. So fundamentally, there are actions that can be taken by the international community to strengthen Lebanon's domestic proceeding while they move forward in uncovering what happened during the blast. We and other organizations have for years been calling on Parliament to move on legislation around independence of the judiciary. This is a very basic cornerstone of establishing rule of law in Lebanon, which is missing today. More pressure needs to be brought to bear on political actors to move forward on some of these critical reforms. What we're talking about today is the crime of August 4, 2020, but it is also broader than that. It is about a failure of institutions to establish rule of law in the country. And this is what we are fighting for when we are fighting for the victims of the blast.
شكرا لما. سريعا بدي اسالك لما تفوت دغري بصلب الموضوع، شو هو مجلس حقوق الانسان؟ وين اهميه تشكيل اللجنه، او خلينا نقول شو الطرح اللي عم يتقدم بهي الحاله للجمهور ربما اللي ما كثير بيعرف التفاصيل؟ هل نحن عم نحكي عن محكمه؟ البعض ببلشوا يحكوا عن محكمه، البعض بيحكي عن لجنه تقصي حقائق، عم نحكي عن اليات معينه، لجنه تحقيق دوليه او بعثه دوليه من قبل مجلس حقوق الانسان بالامم المتحده. عن شو عم نحكي تحديدا لما فقيه؟
Thank you, Ali. the Human Rights Council, of course, is a UN mechanism. Its mandate is to uphold human rights globally. So one of the tools that we have is to advance a resolution at the Human Rights Council establishing an investigative mechanism into the blast. This is not a court. It is a decision by the members of the Human Rights Council to investigate, to conduct a fact-finding mission, to understand the causes of the blast and who was responsible for the blast. This type of step is something that the Human Rights Council is increasingly doing in cases of serious rights violation. And fundamentally, the explosion at the port is a human rights violation. It is a violation of the right to life. And we are also seeing the perpetual violation of the right to remedy. All of the victims have the right to remedy under international law. And so this mechanism could look into both the causes of the blast, as well as the individuals who are responsible for trying to cover up what happened on August 4, 2020, and who are trying to undermine the pursuit of justice for the victims. So this is the request that we and hundreds of other organizations and dozens of parliamentarians have been putting to the members of the Human Rights Council. And we believe the steps that have been taken in the past month just underline the importance of international action now.
تماما. آية مجدوب بناء على اللي قالته لما فقيه عن أن هاي الآلية من جهة لا تتعارض مع التحقيق المحلي، هي ستبحث، هي آلية للبحث بأسباب الانفجار بالمسؤولين والمعرقلين بهذا المحل. كيف بتشتغل هاي الآلية؟ هل موافقة الدولة اللبنانية لتشكيل اللجنة ضرورية، شرط أساسي؟ هل فيها تتشكل بغض النظر عن موافقة الدولة اللبنانية؟ شو المسار لنقول للوصول لهذا الشيء، لنقدر نعرف شو الدور اللي ممكن نعمله لمواكبته؟
هلا مجلس حقوق الإنسان بيجتمع 3 مرات بالسنة. وكل بلد حتى لو ما كان عضو بمجلس حقوق الإنسان في حط نص نسميه قرار أو resolution، وهذا القرار بنص على إنشاء بعثة تقصي حقائق مثلا أو أي بعثة تحقيق تانية. بعدين 47 عضو بمجلس حقوق الإنسان بيصوت على هذا القرار، والقرار إذا صوتوا الأغلبية عليه بيسري. ولا دولة عندها حق الفيتو بمجلس حقوق الإنسان، فالكل بتصوت نفس الشيء. ونحن في عنا تجربة قبل مع بعثة تقصي حقائق من مجلس حقوق الإنسان. مثلا بعد 2006 مجلس حقوق الإنسان بعثة تقصي حقائق أو لجنة تحقيق على لبنان للتحقيق بجرائم الحرب يلي ارتكبتها إسرائيل بلبنان. فمن قبل مبعوث هيك بعثة على لبنان، وهيك بعث ممكن ينبعثوا حتى بدون موافقة البلد يلي هو قيد التحقيق. مثلا كتير بعد ما يصير في حرب بين إسرائيل والأراضي المحتلة مثلا، دايما مجلس حقوق الإنسان بيبعث بعثة تحقيق لتحقق بشو هن جرائم الحرب يلي ارتكبوا بهذا الكونفليكت. أكيد هول البعث بينشئوا حتى لو إسرائيل كل مرة ما بتكون موافقة على إنه تنبعث هيدي البعثة. ففي كتير تجارب بهول بعثات تقصي الحقائق بيحققوا انتهاكات حقوق إنسان، والبلد يلي بيكون عم قيد التحقيق ما بيكون موافق على هيدي اللجنة. فهاي مش مشكلة. وبس لأعطي كمان كم إكزامبل تاني عن هول البعثات. مثلا هلأ بعد حرب أوكرانيا كمان شكل مجلس حقوق الإنسان لجنة تقصي حقائق لحتى تحقق بشو هن انتهاكات حقوق الإنسان وانتهاكات الانترناشونال هيومانيتاريان لا. هل عم يكون في جرائم حرب بأوكرانيا لحتى توثق هذا الشيء مشان بعدين بعد ما تخلص الحرب يكون في criminal proceedings. كمان نفس الشيء بس بلشوا الاحتجاجات الشعبية بإيران، كمان شكل مجلس حقوق الإنسان بعثة تقصي حقائق تحقق بالانتهاكات يلي عم ترتكب بإيران. فهذا الشيء بينعمل دايما من مجلس حقوق الإنسان، ومثل ما قالت لما أبداً ما بيستبدل دور التحقيق المحلي. هو مش تحقيق ل criminal proceedings، هو تحقيق بس لكشف الحقائق والأدلة.
يعني آية إذا بتسمحي لي قبل ما أرجع لعند لما، يعني نحن اليوم المطلب المطروح على الطاولة واللي نحن بصدده هو لجنة تقصي حقائق لمعرفة الأسباب ومن تحميل المسؤولية، وأيضا سينظر إذا افترضنا هاي اللجنة قامت بالمعرقلين، جزء من شغلها بيكون بعرقلة التحقيق، كمان بينظر بهيدا الشيء. يمكن هيدا اللي ذكرتيه كمان لما بعتقد صح؟ هيدا النتيجة بالمعنى السياسي وبالمعنى القضائي شو بننتظر؟ شو إيجابيات هيدا الشيء الحصول عليه؟
اوكي، اول شيء مثل ما قلت علي، نحن بعثة تقصي الحقائق يلي نحن عم نطالب فيها حتطلع اول شيء بكيف وليش اجى الامونيوم نايتريت على لبنان، ليش قعد بالبور 6 سنين، مين كان عارف ومين كان عنده المسؤولية انه يزيل الخطر عن السلامة العامة ومعمل هذا الشيء، وبعدين ب4 آب شو سبب الحريق وشو سبب الانفجار. وبعدين كمان نحن طالبين انه يطلعوا مين جرب بطمس التحقيق، مين جرب يعرقل التحقيق، وهل assassinations الاغتيالات يلي صارت من بعد الانفجار، مثلا اغتيال لقمان سليم، اغتيال جو بالجاني، اغتيال منير بورجيلي، هل هول كمان كانوا جزء من يعني تجربة طمس التحقيق؟ فهدول هن الاشياء اللي عم نطالب فيها. هلا كيف هو اللي بيساعدوا بالعداله؟ اول شيء بيساعدوا بالحق بالحقيقه، اللي هو حق كل، يعني نحن كشعب لبناني، واكيد حق العائلات يلي خسروا ناس. بس ثاني شيء كمان بيساعدوا بالمحاسبه. مثلا في كتير هلا في كذا تحقيق او كذا محاكمه هلا جزائيه، مثل بفرنسا وبالمانيا، انفتحوا تلقائيا، لانه كل ما يموت حدا من عندهم ببلد اجنبي بينفتح تحقيق ومحكمه جزائيه، بس ما عندهم هن القدرات انه يحققوا بانفجار مرفأ بيروت. فهن كانوا ناطرين التحقيق اللبناني ليخلص لحتى تبلش هونيك تسري القضية. بس سألناهم إذا بيقدروا يستعملوا تقرير من لجنة دولية، وقالوا إنه إيه. فهذا التقرير ممكن يستعمل بالملاحقات القضائية اللي عم تصير ببلاد تانية. بعدين بتخلي الأشخاص اللي عندهم جنسية تانية كمان، اللي تضرروا بالانفجار، كمان إنه يفتحوا قضايا جزائية أو مدنية ب يعني أقضية تانية، كمان مرتكزين على التحقيق الدولي اللي انعمل. وثالث شيء كمان هذا التحقيق الدولي ممكن يسرع مثلا التحقيق أو يضغط على السلطات اللبنانية إنه يكملوا بالتحقيق. يعني نحن اللي طالبينه إنه هذا التحقيق يفرجي مين كان مسؤول، مين كان عارف. فلما الشعب اللبناني كمان عنده بإيده هدول الأدلة وعنده بإيده هول الأسماء، كمان بيشكل ضغط على السلطات اللبنانية إنه تجري بالتحقيق المحلي.
شكرا آية، واضح جدا قديش هذا الموضوع مهم على المستوى معرفة الحقيقة، معرفة العدالة، المحاسبة، وأيضا المسؤولية. لما بحكم تجربتك الواسعة بهيومن رايتس ووتش وبمجالات قبل، اليوم في جانب سياسي بهذا الإطار. نحن قدام مجلس حقوق إنسان في 37 دولة في عالم 22 شباط 2022، خلينا نقول ملهي بأوكرانيا، في تغيرات على المستوى الدولي. نحن إذا بهمنا نوصل لهذا الشيء، كيف قادرين نقنع؟ شو الشغل اللي لازم ينعمل؟ شو الشغل اللي عم تعملوه؟ أنا بعرف إنه عم تعملوا شغل، في شيء بينحكى عنه، شيء لازم يكون عم ينعمل بطريقة يمكن بعيدا عن الأضواء. شو فينا نعمل بالسياسة وبالقانون بحقوق الإنسان لإقناع والحصول على موافقة هذه الدول، وبالتالي الحصول على تصويت إيجابي لصالح هذه اللجنة؟ وهل في جدول زمني كمان بهذا الإطار ولا عم نحكي عن جدول زمني مفتوح؟
Thank you, Ali. Fundamentally, the decision of the members of the Human Rights Council to support a resolution or to support a joint statement around the investigation, it will be a political decision. What we have tried to do is to underline the importance of justice and accountability in the case of the Beirut explosion. There has been very robust investment in Lebanese institutions by foreign states. Foreign governments are supporting the Lebanese army, the judiciary. And what we have also been pointing to is that the very causes of the explosion, the corruption, the mismanagement, the impunity that has contributed to this ongoing violation are some of the very fundamental things that are undermining the ability for Lebanon to move forward on a number of fronts today. They're undermining the ability of institutions to even fulfill their most basic functions. So if you care today about a functioning Lebanese state, you want a stable and strong Lebanese army, a functioning ministries, both on the local and international level. We need to address this crisis of impunity that we have in the country. We also are pointing to the fact that the Beirut explosion was not just a domestic event. It did not just affect Lebanon. There are companies that are involved that are international companies, UK companies, now a US company. The nationals that were involved also come from a number of different countries. So when we're thinking about the scope of the crime, it is not a crime that just exists within Lebanese borders. And the culpability for the explosion may also extend beyond Lebanese borders. These are all things that point to the importance of international action in engaging with the crime on August 4.
شكرا لما. سؤالي لآية بالمعنى السياسي، في مرحلة كانت المحكمة الدولية، كانت في عطول لبنان، عطول كل ما ينطرح قضية يحكى عن موضوع التدخل الخارجي وما التدخل الخارجي، وببداية السيادة المحلية والمخاوف. كيف بتردي على هيدي المخاوف؟ كيف بتردي عليها كآية مجذوب، أو ربما أي ناشط أو أي حدا بكرة ممكن يكون عنده ليش هيدا الشيء ما بيشكل خطر لا على استقرار البلد ولا على سيادته وغيره؟
Thank you, Ali. It's a sensitive question, فحجاوب بالإنجليزي لحتى لحتى تكون كتير واضحة. Of course, أنا لبنانية. أكيد كلبنانية بدي يكون عندي قضاء هون بلبنان ممكن استعين له لما حقوقي تنتهك. بس هذا الشيء unfortunately hasn't been possible over the last since I've been alive. We've seen time and time again the judiciary act to protect the interests of the political class, the big business interests in the country, and not the rights of the population. We've seen this on issues related to corruption. We've seen this on issues related to human rights violations like torture. We've seen this related to the banking crisis. And so, unfortunately, they put us in a place where we cannot rely on our domestic judiciary for justice. Of course, as Lama mentioned at the very beginning, we are still fighting for justice domestically. We are still evaluating constantly the domestic investigation. We are still always trying to hold the Lebanese authorities to account domestically. We're trying to push the law on the independence of the judiciary. We're trying, every time we document a case of torture or other human rights violation, we raise the case with the Lebanese authorities and ask for justice locally. And this is not going to stop. We're going to keep doing this even for the Beirut blast. But we have a situation now where it's very clear that the Lebanese judicial authorities are either unwilling or not capable of bringing justice for the victims of the Beirut blast and for the Lebanese public. So in a situation like this, unfortunately, as painful as it is to have to resort to the international community on an issue like this, we felt that we had no choice but to do so, because as tough as it's been 2.5 years we've been campaigning for this. As tough as it's been, it still presents us with a bit more hope to find the truth than through the local investigation. And everything that we've been seeing from the domestic investigation has unfortunately proven that it was the right call to immediately start calling for an international investigation. Because, unfortunately, all the actions of the political establishment in the case have shown that they'll go to the greatest lengths possible. I mean, the top prosecutor in the country himself, it trampled all over the law in this case. So I think, unfortunately, in a case like this, we have no option but to look to these international UN bodies who were set up to do exactly this kind of thing. They were set up to protect and monitor human rights in situations where the domestic authorities were failing to do so.
شكرا آية مجذوب. بس حابب لوضح للأشخاص اللي عم يبعثوا أسئلة، بنشكركم بالبداية على طرح الأسئلة. نحن رح نخلص بعد ما نخلص مع لما ومع آية الأسئلة اللي حابين نطرحها عليكم، رح نرجع بشكل تدريجي نسأل كل الأسئلة المطروحة، ففيكم تبقوا تبعثوا أسئلة. لما أنا حابب أرجع لسؤال له علاقة ب اليوم ليش لهلا بعد ما صار هيدا الشيء؟ هل كنا ناطرين؟ اليوم عم نحكي أكثر من صرنا بالسنة الثالثة. ليه الملف هل انطرح على مجلس حقوق الإنسان وبعد ما انطرح، وليش ما انطرح لهلا؟ إذا بدنا نعرف. ومين الدول المؤثرة بالقرار؟ مين الدول الأعضاء؟ مين الدول اللي ممكن تدعم هذا التوجه أو ما تدعمه؟ هل في دول ممكن تكون غير مكترثة، دول ممكن تكون مرحبة وتحمل الموضوع، وفي دول بالمقابل رح تسعى للعرقلة؟ إذا بس فينا نحط بهيدا الإطار. وهل في دورات؟ نعرف إن في دورات لمجلس حقوق الإنسان، في دورة رح تصير آخر هيدا الشهر، هل تركيزنا عليها أو لا؟ بعتقد يمكن أكثر من سؤال صار سألك بنفس الإطار. لما هذا المجلس، مين حلفائنا، مين خصومنا، كيف وشو لازم نعمل هلا قبل ما نرجع نشوف يمكن لاحقا بعد شوي كيف لازم نتحرك.
Thanks, Ali. So for 2.5 years, we have been engaging with representatives from different diplomatic missions about the Beirut explosion and the need for international engagement on the explosion. And this has included Western European states, North American states, but also some other states, from the region and more broadly. And in our conversations with them, they point to a number of different factors about why they are not yet willing to move forward with supporting an international investigation. Some of these are things that we've discussed in this context, not wanting to undermine a domestic process, allowing the domestic process to move forward. We had elections last year, allowing the elections to play out without international interference. And frankly, other global priorities that have, taken precedent over Lebanon. And we have, I think, very solid responses to all of these issues that have been raised. And we know that some countries are, impacted themselves. The German government lost a member of the German mission in Beirut during the explosion. The Dutch ambassador's wife was killed in the explosion. There were, children of other nationalities that were killed in the explosion. And these countries have taken, I think, a real interest in trying to track what is happening domestically and, raising concerns along the way. I think what we are trying to do at this juncture is move from individual country level statements of concern to unified action where countries can come together who are recognizing the real crisis of impunity that is happening in Lebanon today and send Lebanon a clear message on this. So at the upcoming Human Rights Council session, we are hoping that states will take that step. whether or not that moves forward, again, fundamentally, it will be a political decision. And I think what we have been trying to do is to encourage people to speak out about the importance of the international community engaging in this, and really trying to counter some of the criticisms of moving forward with the investigation. So showing what is at stake, and then really undercutting some of the arguments that have been made against an investigation. If I can, Ali, I just want to go back to the comments that Aya was making. I think many of us on this call are Lebanese. Who among us today has faith or trust that a domestic investigation will be allowed to move forward under the current circumstances, that we will have justice, that we will learn what happened? I can almost guarantee to a person that there's no one on this call that would say that they have that faith or trust. And who among us trusts that our institutions who are empowered to protect us are actually capable of doing so? How do we know that there will not be another catastrophe like this, again, because of corruption, because of mismanagement? These are some of the fundamentals of what has been broken between the Lebanese and the state. And it really just signifies the deep failure of state institutions, which is why such an exceptional measure as this type of fact-finding mission is really warranted.
شكرا لما فقيه. بعتقد لما ذكرت كلمة فاندمنتال، نحن مشكلتنا بالبلد بهيك قضايا بعدنا على مستوى البديهيات، يعني المشكلة بعدنا هالقد جوهرية مع اللي عم نواجهه بالتحقيق أو بأمور تانية. آية مجدوب كانت عم تحكي لما عن السعي لإصدار بيان مشترك جون ستيتمنت، إذا فهمت على المضبوط، من أجل دفع، من أجل إرسال بعثة دولية للتقصي حاجات. فينا نحكي شوي بالتفصيل عن هيدا المسار؟ هل نحن يعني اليوم تركيزنا أو نضالنا رح يكون لصدور المرحلة المباشرة لصدور بيان مشترك أو للتصويت على إرسال البعثة؟ حبيت استوضح النقطة بس منك.
Sure. Malik, I mean, since كل الأسئلة عم يجوا بالإنجليزي, I think most people here speak English, so I'm going to switch to English if that's okay. Okay, so only a resolution at the Human Rights Council can establish this fact-finding mission. But oftentimes, before states put forward a resolution at the Human Rights Council, they put forward what we call a joint statement, بيان مشترك. And this joint statement is more of an expression of concern. It's the way states signal that they are concerned about a certain human rights violation. They usually say what they would like to see the state do in order to avoid further action. In many cases, usually before states put forward a resolution, they put forward a joint statement. This is the natural progression of things. And this joint statement puts the state under question on notice, and then it can then be followed up with a resolution. But I just want to be clear that the joint statement itself doesn't establish the investigative mission. It can do something like say, in the absence of an independent national domestic investigation, there should then, if there's no domestic investigation that's impartial and independent that's allowed to move forward, then there should be an international investigation. So it kind of is a building block towards a resolution. Obviously, we've been calling for, for the last 2.5 years, we have been calling for a resolution to establish this fact-finding mission. But, due to the many obstacles that Lama spoke about, we still haven't found that country or group of countries that's willing to lead on a resolution. But we're, hopeful that through all of the advocacy and campaigning, that maybe there could be a joint statement at the upcoming Human Rights Council that could start the building block towards a resolution establishing a fact-finding mission in the June session of the Human Rights Council.
شكرا آية. تفضلي لما، ورح جرب. أنا بفهم كتير منيح لما وآية إنه هيدا الشغل اللي عم تعملوه اللي هو شغل لوبينج كتير دقيق، ما في الواحد ربما يتوقع، بس إنه في تقدم نسبيا لما بهيدا المحل، متفائلين إنه ممكن يطلع هيدا الشيء، يعني بناء على عم كفي مطرح ما وقفت آية. حابة تعلقي على الشيء الثاني أكيد.
And I wanted to speak actually specifically about France's role. You know, in the days after the blast, President Macron came to Lebanon. He stood with the Lebanese people. He made promises to the Lebanese people. And other countries, for right or wrong, continue to look towards France to lead on Lebanon. And we know that there has been strong reticence from the French government to move forward with a fact-finding mission. And we believe this is fundamentally an error in their judgment in terms of how they can best support Lebanon. And we've been trying to urge them to shift course here. I think I really wanted to underline sort of the importance of France's engagement on this and the role that they would play on either a joint statement or a resolution moving forward in the future. In terms of the sort of likelihood of this happening, I think the events of the last weeks, as you know, frankly, as devastating as they were for justice and for the victims, they have reignited some conversations around the need for international action here. We had a case where the public prosecutor, who had recused himself from the investigation and who was himself amongst those that were charged by the judge, take steps to intervene to release all of the detainees. There are some fundamental and clear conflicts of interest here that frankly are not going to be resolved domestically. And this clash within the judiciary and the subsequent attacks against the investigative judge, against Judge Bitar, I think have really raised concern about the state of the independence of the judiciary and the ability for judges to do their work in Lebanon, as it should. So I don't think there are any guarantees about what is going to happen at the session in March. I do think that it is, you know, well past time for action on this issue. And again, you know, the events of the past weeks only underline some of the concerns that we have about the state of the judiciary in Lebanon today.
شكرا لما آية. بحال يعني اللي قالته لما بالجلسة المقبلة صدر البيان المشترك، ولنقول الأمور كانت، لناخذ البست سيناريو، الأمور كانت إيجابية وكان في تجاوب وما في عرقلة. شو ممكن التايم لاين، الجدول الزمني اللي فينا نتوقع فيه بين الجلسة اللي بدها تصير بآخر شهر شباط الحالي وبين ما نحتر نشوف وصول البعثة على لبنان، لما نقول إنه تصدر لبداية عملها قبل ما نقول أي متى تصدر؟ هل بالتجارب الدولية عم نقول بأفضل الحالات شو ممكن نتوقع؟
Okay, so again, this is the best case scenario, and I just want to stress that as international organizations, we can do advocacy with states to put forward a joint statement. We can do advocacy with them on the kind of language that we want to see in the joint statement, but ultimately it's states who decide when they put forward a joint statement and the language that the joint statement contains. But let's say best case scenario. The best case scenario for us would be that in March, a state or group of states put forward a joint statement that very clearly says that there should be an impartial and independent national investigation that's allowed to proceed without any political interference. And failing that, the Human Rights Council will take further action and establish an international investigation. That's in the March session. Then the Human Rights Council meets again in June, at the mid-end of June. If by then there had been no progress on the domestic front, then ideally states would put forward a resolution this time, not a joint statement, a resolution at the Human Rights Council establishing a fact-finding mission into the causes and responsibility for the Beirut blast, as well as who's been responsible for obstructing efforts at justice, as well as some of the related, some of the assassinations that may be related to efforts to obstruct the truth and justice in the case. Ideally then, once that resolution is put forward, it's approved by a majority vote of the 47 members of the Human Rights Council. Once it's then approved by the Human Rights Council members, then usually the resolution in its text will have designated who should be responsible for setting the fact-finding mission up. Often it's the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. So just to also clarify one point, that Lebanon would not pay, it's not like the tribunal, Lebanon would not pay the costs of this fact-finding mission. And then it usually takes, it could be just a few weeks between the resolution passing and then the appointment of the members of the fact-finding mission and it beginning work. Again, this is all the best case scenario, but this is, we will do our utmost to do the advocacy and campaigning necessary to try to get to where we want to go, which is having an international investigation look into the Beirut blast.
يعني آية إذا فهمت عليك بشكل صحيح، يعني إذا الأمور كانت إيجابية جدا ممكن نتوقع بآب أيلول 23 يكون في لجنة تقصي حقائق. طبعا عم نقول إنه هيدا الخيار
لو كل شيء، يعني
لو كل شيء، يعني حتى لو الأمور كانت كتير إيجابية نحن ما بنتوقع قبل 6 أشهر هيدا الشيء. لما فقيه من خلال تجربتك ومواكبتك لكل أداء السلطة اللبنانية وتعاملها مع هذه الملفات، هل هذا الشيء ونحن عم نحكي عن سلطة هي كسياسيين هن مدانين أو في شبهة عليهم كان تقصير أو أكثر من ذلك، كيف رح يتعاطوا أو كيف عم يتعاطوا مع هذا الشيء؟ هل في محاولات عم تلمسوها لعرقلة للحديث مع أطراف؟ هل الدبلوماسية اللبنانية المسخرة بهذا المحل أو الأحزاب تعرقل؟ عم تلمسوا هذا الشيء ولا لا التعقيدات مرتبطة بالمشهد الدولي ككله بمصالح الدول؟
Thank you, Ali. I'm going to answer your question, but first I want to add one point. We've been focusing a lot on the Human Rights Council because we believe that it's our best chance for getting a strong investigative mechanism. But there are also other mechanisms that can be pursued. And I mentioned as well some of the cases that are moving forward in third jurisdictions. I think this is important. We should continue to support these cases as they are developing in other countries. There are also other, UN experts who have mandates that would allow them to investigate what happened on August 4. There are some of these UN experts who have already spoken out with concerns around the Beirut blast, and we would encourage them to continue to engage on the blast, and in particular now on the undermining of the judicial proceedings that are trying to move forward domestically. So I just wanted to sort of put that to the side. Hala, your question, ذكرني بس what you asked me. Hala. Sorry, you're muted, Ali.
عفوا. بهيدا الشيء كيف ممكن تتوقع تكون ردة فعل الدولة اللبنانية أو اللي ممكن
ردة فعل مظبوط. Yes. So yeah. So you may, I believe Ali and others may know that we authored, some 700-page report conducting our own investigation of culpability of the blast. And to do that, we engaged also with some officials in government. And what we found is that there were individuals that were willing to speak with us, and in some cases, provide us information. And this was driven by different motivations. In some cases, it was driven by a motivation to pass blame, and in some cases, it was driven by a motivation for truth and transparency and justice. So I think there are people within the system that outside investigators, independent investigators could rely on to compile evidence of the crimes that took place on August the 4th and the time since in terms of undermining the investigation. So I think there is recourse for some official documentation and witness statements that we should be working to compile and to gather. At the same time, of course, there is interference in trying to move forward, with the investigation. Aya has already mentioned the events of Tayouni. We have all seen the abhorrent attacks against Judge Bitar and the personal threats against his security. We also, in the context of releasing the report, we afterwards received a request from Hezbollah to come down and sit with them to discuss the findings of the report. Quite clear statement from them that they hoped that we would not be part of the propaganda campaign against them. Clear indications that they were not committed to advancing justice and that this was a distraction from the economic crisis in the country. There are a number of members of parliament, political parties that have spoken out about the importance of accountability and the importance to move forward with international action. And then there are those actors that have undermined steps to pursue justice, not just domestically, but also internationally. So I think we can't deal with it as sort of one grouping. We need to recognize that there are different motivations and interests within the government. There is scope to receive some support from different aspects of, representation in the government, but that there are interests at play here that would much rather that this crime be swept under the rug, like so many other crimes before it. And we need to continue to stand up and say that, that's unacceptable. And to demand that there is justice for the victims.
شكرا لما. السؤال الأخير لآية وبرجع للما، شو فينا نعمل؟ يعني إن كان على المستوى المحلي، الناس المهتمين، عائلات الضحايا، الناشطين، الأحزاب، الأفراد، الجمعيات، شو فيها تعمل؟ وكمان شو في عمل الاغتراب؟ يعني رح أسأل نفس السؤال لآية وبعدين ارجع للما. تفضلي لآية.
Thank you. So, I think the most important thing is to continue calling for justice for the Beirut blast. I know that people, the economic situation is terrible in the country, and people are very much consumed by the day-to-day of, by their day-to-day, how am I going to put food on the table? How am I going to heat my house? But I think it's really important to keep the issue of the Beirut blast alive, because the people who are responsible for the Beirut blast are also responsible for the economic crisis, for the corruption, and for a whole host of other abuses in the country. It's the same, we're fighting against the same culture of impunity. So I think, for one, it's just really important to continue fighting for justice, not let it be one of those things. We're very, we hear this a lot, we're never going to know the truth. No, this cannot go unpunished like all of the other crimes that happened in the country. They literally blew us up in our own homes. We need to say that this is a line in the sand. We won't accept this culture of impunity anymore, and we're going to continue to demand justice. We do this by continuing to talk about the Beirut blast, by standing in support with the families of the victims on the 4th of every month, by talking about this issue on social media, on talk shows, for organizations like yours to continue talking about justice for the Beirut blast, trying to find new and innovative ways to push for justice, and continuing also to fight for civil society organizations like ours, continuing also to fight and advocate for the law on the independence of the judiciary, because without an independent judiciary, there's no hope for justice domestically, for the Beirut blast, or for any of the other abuses inflicted on the entire population. In terms of what the diaspora can do, we've been working very closely with some of the foreign families who lost their family members in the blast, and they have been very instrumental in making it a national issue in their countries. But I think more can be done on this front. So I'll use the example of Sarah Copeland, for example. She has really made it an issue that Australian people care about. She writes op-eds in Australian media. She appears on Australian media talking about the Beirut blast and calling on the Australian government responsibility to fight for justice for her son who was killed in the explosion. She has linked up with members with members of the parliament in Australia who are either of Lebanese origin or have a large Lebanese constituency within the areas that they represent, to also ask them to continually keep raising the voice on this. And this has kind of put pressure on Australia to act, to do something related to the Beirut blast. So we've seen them mention accountability for the Beirut blast in the statements that they give before the Human Rights Council. This is not the same, this is not establishing a fact-finding mission or anything, but when they list the human rights abuses of concern to Australia, they do mention accountability for the Beirut blast. So I think Lebanese diaspora and other countries can also do more to make it a national issue, to reach out to their representatives, to write about it in the media, make it a public issue, to put pressure on their own governments to act regarding justice for the blast.
Lama?
Thanks, Ali. I very much second what Aya has said, and will just make two brief points. The first, with regard to the importance of the actions of the diaspora. I think, one of Lebanon's, best national treasures is our, personal talent, and we have very influential Lebanese in a number of states that could be leading on a Human Rights Council investigative mechanism. And I really encourage them to speak out and to use their connections, to use their prominence to advance these issues. We mentioned, the issue that, this is not just a domestic crime. The owner of the ammonium nitrate, Savara Limited, was a company that was registered in the UK. Where is the outrage vis-a-vis the UK government and their failure to advance and to raise issues regarding accountability of this? I mean, this is a company, again, it was registered in the UK. So where are our sort of influential diaspora in the UK in raising this issue with their representatives? There is a civil case against TGS, which is a company in the United States related to the role of a company that they've since bought, Spectrum, and the role of Spectrum in the Beirut blast investigation. Again, influential Lebanese Americans raising this issue as one of U.S. priority. I think, we saw that the U.S. government engaged quite robustly when it came to the release of an American national who was detained for the concerns of his responsibility related to the blast. And this should be met equally with lobbying and action and outrage around the role of what is a US-based company and potentially this, crime of horrific proportions, leveling half of the city. I think the other point I want to raise is the importance of protecting space for civil society in Lebanon. The front line of advocating for human rights of Lebanese is the civil society here. And we have seen increasingly that civil society has come under threat through the use of ministerial decrees, through the use of criminal defamation laws. And when these types of incidents happen, we need to collectively be outraged and speak out against it. We cannot just say, the Minister of Interior is only banning LGBT events. Why should that be of a concern for me? No, this is banning outright the engagement on critical human rights issues. And this is the kind of context where we see that there is a slippery slope in terms of further degradation of rights. So I would say again, protection for civil society in Lebanon, and using your positions of power and influence in the diaspora to advocate the case of the blast are two critical things that members of this community could do.
شكرا لما. بعتقد كان كآخر مداخلة وبوجود قسم كبير من الدياسبورا موجود معنا هون. أنا بشكركم على الإجابة على الأسئلة. آية مجذوب ولما فقيه رح بلش هلا ننتقل نجاوب على الأسئلة بشكل سريع رح نمرق عليهم كلهم، بس بحب أذكر كل اللي معنا إنه اللي حابين يوصلوا يعني تفاصيل عن سلسلة اللقاءات والندوات السياسية اللي عم تعملها كلنا إرادة، فيهم بس يكتبوا الإيميل تبعهم بالشات ونحن رح نتولى جمع هاي الأسماء والبقاء على تواصل معكم. داني كان سأل سؤال حول هل تعتقد أن إنشاء لجنة تحقيق دولية فعليا سوف تصل إلى حل، كما أن برأيك الدولة سوف تتدخل دون وجود منافع شخصية على المستوى؟ هل الدول ممكن تتدخل؟ بعتقد يمكن جاوبنا على هذا الموضوع بالسياق آية، بس عندك شيء تزيديه حوله. هل فيها توصل لنتيجة؟ هل بتساعدنا بالوصول لنتيجة؟ وقديش الدول قادرة تدعمنا إذا ما عندها منافع من هذا الشيء؟
Okay, first of all, I just want to make it clear that the Human Rights Council is, once they appoint the members of the fact-finding mission, these members are independent. They don't answer to their states. They are independent members, experts appointed by the Human Rights Council. So, I think we've talked a lot about I'm sure that the Lebanese state and the Lebanese officials will try to complicate the work of and the investigations. But as Lama was mentioning before, her and I worked on a lengthy investigation related to the Beirut blast, and there is a wealth of available documents and individuals who are willing to speak out and say what happened, either because they believe it's a national duty, or because they hear that somebody else has said their part, and so they want to say their part as well, because they don't want a report to come out without their side of the story and their attempts to remove blame off of themselves. And again, the Human Rights Council, they send the reason that they send fact-finding missions and commissions of inquiry to countries is because those countries are either unwilling or incapable of doing this themselves. And oftentimes they send these missions to investigate abuses in countries that are hostile to them and their aims. So they sent it to, there are missions on Iran, on the crimes committed by Israel, on racism in the US. And these commissions always find a way to do their investigations with minimal or little cooperation from the state that's being investigated. So this would not be a new thing, that Lebanon, which is being investigated, does not want to cooperate and share information. They do this work in a context where oftentimes the state being investigated does not consent to the investigation.
لما حابة تعلقي شيء حول هذا الموضوع قبل ما نكفي بالأسئلة؟ Okay. Okay. One question من نوال المعوشي. Both have been working on August 4 since 2 years. Did they reach names of person responsible? I suppose yes. If not, it be okay. So why you don't say publicly which person are responsible? حضرتك حكيتي لما عن انه عملتوا تحقيق داخلي، هل نشرتوا اسماء؟ واذا ما نشرتوا ليش ما نشرتوا؟
Hi, thank you, Nawal, for the question. So yes, we have done the investigation, and we did publish the names of individuals who we believe are culpable that have responsibility for the blast. And I will paste now in the chat a link to our report so you can see the full listing there. The report does not suggest that these are the only individuals that are culpable, but these are the individuals for whom, again, as I was saying earlier, they had knowledge and they had responsibility to act to secure the public welfare and public safety. But I'll include that for you in the chat.
ميراي قطار كانت عم تذكرنا انه كمان جنرال ناداف كان من الاشخاص اللي صار معهم تم اغتياله او شيء. كمان بتقول ميراي قطار بتسالنا اذا الدول الكبرى بين فرنسا و اذا الدول مثل الولايات المتحده وفرنسا ما بدهم يوصلوا للحقيقه بالنظر لمصالحهم، هل كمان عم تسأل عن موضوع إسرائيل والشكوك حول إسرائيل؟ هل خلينا نقول بالجزء الأول فرنسا وأمريكا شو توجهاتهم بهذا المحل؟ مسهلين أو معرقلين بشكل واضح؟ ما بعرف آية لما
I do an answer.
تفضلي لما. أنا أوكي مثل بدكم.
Okay, I'm happy to answer, and then Lama, please feel free to add. So basically السؤال إذا فرنسا وأمريكا عم بيعطلوا التحقيق. إيه علي؟
عطلوا التحقيق أو ما يسهلوا تشكيل المسار اللي مقترحينه.
Okay. I mean, as Lama has said before, France has had a role in obstructing the international investigation. We've heard from many other countries that who would have liked to move forward, that they don't want to do so without the consent or green light, as they said it, from France. And France has so far not given this green light to move forward with a resolution at the Human Rights Council. And I can also paste a link to an article that I wrote while I was at Human Rights Watch that also details the way that the French involvement has been obstructing an international investigation. But it's important to note again that the Human Rights Council is a body made up of 47 states, and these states have there are quotas for each region to have representation in the Human Rights Council, and none of the states have veto powers. So there have often been resolutions and fact-finding missions that have been passed by the Human Rights Council that have been opposed by the US, for example. So when the Black Lives Matter protests were happening a few years ago in the US, in the aftermath of that, the Human Rights Council did set up an investigative body to look at systemic racism in the US. So this isn't the same power dynamics in politics that we see somewhere like the Security Council, for example. This is a grouping of states from a variety, from different regions where no one state has a veto power to block any of the decisions of the Human Rights Council.
لما حابة تضيفي شيء حول هذا الموضوع. أوكي، أنا كنت حابب بس ارجع شوي لسؤال سألته إلسي، لكم إلسي مفرج، لكم صوت نحن بحاجة بمجلس حقوق الإنسان لما يقطع القرار. لما عم نحكي يمكن عن خلينا نبلش بموضوع الجون ستيتمنت، هل في شروط معينة لعدد معين، ولاحقا بالتصويت إذا قلنا بالمجلس قديش بحاجة.
Thanks, Ali. So for a resolution, you just need a simple majority. And for the joint statement, there is not a fixed number, but states would not want to issue a statement unless there was a significant core of states that were supporting it. So I think it's on, it again comes down to lobbying efforts of trying to get, a significant sort of quorum of states to sign on to support something, but there isn't a fixed number to issue a joint statement.
يعني من 47 إذا قلنا نحن بحاجة الأغلبية المطلقة، يعني النص زائد واحد من 47. أوكي، وبرأيك لما قديش نحن بعد عنهم بظروف إذا مشي الموضوع مع بشكل أو بآخر، هل في صعوبة يتأمنوا؟
Right now, we don't have the votes to pass a resolution at the Human Rights Council. I think we, the sort of gradual approach that Aya mentioned is the one that we have been working towards, so that we can sort of generate additional support. But this is not something that, we can do, or even civil society can do alone. It really has to be a very robust effort, because again, these are political considerations in an environment where there are a lot of global concerns, and we need to make clear why Lebanon should be a priority.
في سنة سبلاني كانت سألت سؤال جاوبنا عنه بهذا الإطار. مونيكا بورغمان، زوجة الراحل شهيد لقمان سليم اللي بنحيي ذكرى كم يوم كانت ذكرى استشهاده، وكمان عم تذكرنا انه تحقيق بملف لقمان سليم لهلا بعد ما صار في تقدم، ونفس الشيء بحالة جوزيف بالجاني. ومن هون هي بتتمنى أو تأمل إنه هيدي اللجنة تقدر تحقق خلق بهيدا الموضوع. وهيدا كمان رأيي بتشاركوا أكيد مع عائلات الضحايا. عم برجع أشوف هون كمان بين التعليق وبين السؤال راوية حاج بتسأل هل ممكن لجنة التحقيق التقصي حقائق تقدر تعرف عن أدوار الدول غير الدولة اللبنانية بهذا الإطار، وهل ممكن تطلب الحصول على معلومات أو أمور معينة؟
Yeah, maybe I'll just say another word. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Lama, I'll answer after.
Okay, I would just say another word about sort of the scope of the investigation. First, on the point that Monica raised, yes, it's a very important point. You know, the rights that are at stake here are not just the right to life that was undermined during the explosion, but also the right to remedy. And there is a need to look at who has been responsible for the political interference, who has undermined the domestic investigation, and of course, who has perpetrated crimes in the context of trying to do so, which would include any assassinations that were connected to the investigation. In terms of the roles of other states, absolutely. You know, this isn't, the investigation would not need to stop at Lebanon's borders. In fact, as we've said, you know, this crime has reverberations well beyond Lebanon's borders.
آية حابة تضيفي شيء بهذا الموضوع؟ اوكي. نديم شحادي عم يسأل حول ال Private Non-Governmental International Investigation Organization، عم يحكي عن بيلينكيت أو انترسبت. هل في أدوار، هل ممكن المراهنة على، لأنه حكيت لما عن أكثر من خيار أو أكثر من آلية، هل يمكن المراهنة على هيك آليات غير دولية؟ آية؟
So of course private non-governmental organizations like Bellingcat, like Human Rights Watch have been doing this kind of work. So we have looked into you know, as a non-governmental organization, we did do a long investigation into who was responsible for the Beirut blast, looking at official documents. And there's a lot of, you know, an organization like Forensic Architecture, another NGO, they did a simulation of what the inside of the hangar looked like and how the fire could have spread in the hangar. All of these efforts are great, and all of these efforts certainly do help shed light on what happened, but they don't substitute an official international, either, you know, Lebanese investigation or an official UN investigation with many more resources and much more kind of official power. And it's a, you know, record of what happened. So for example, yes, our report, I think the one that Lama pasted in the chat, it is the most public, the most detailed public accounting of what happened with all of the official documents that we relied on. Everything is translated. It's meant to be a resource, but it will not substitute for the results of an official Lebanese or international investigation. So we do need to, and civil society can't replace the role of the state or of these official bodies. So we do need to continue pressing, using the evidence that we've been able to collect about the extent of culpability. So you'll see in the report that we named, you know, the president, the former prime minister, heads of security agencies, former ministers. So that's supposed to create pressure on the states and on international organizations like the UN to take this up and act and move forward with formal accountability proceedings.
شكرا آية. لما بدي في سؤال بين عبير وميراي كمان، عبير خوري، حول النواب عندنا بفرنسا. عم تقول عبير في نواب أصدقاء لبنان عم بيجربوا يضغطوا على الرئيس ماكرون ليدعم لجنة تقصي الحقائق، وشو ممكن يكون في دور بهيدا الإطار، وكيف ممكن الجالية تحديدا بفرنسا بحكم البروكسيميتي اللي بنعرفها بهيدا المحل والدور اللي ممكن تلعبه فرنسا دور محوري بهيدا المحل. وطبعا ميراي عم تسأل قديش فينا نقدر نوثق بماكرون. خلينا نقول ما أنه موضوع ثقة بماكرون بقدر ما هي كيف فينا نضغط فرنسيا، وكيف ممكن الدياسبورا بفرنسا تحديدا تقدر تتحرك برأيكم؟ وهل كمان ممكن كمان يكون في تنسيق؟ بعتقد لما عم تنسقوا كمان مع اللبنانيين الموجودين بفرنسا بعتقد.
Thanks, Ali. I think, yes, I mean, there is a need to really try to engage any allies that we have in government that their positions allow them to make these engagements directly with President Macron's office and also with other states. So France is critical, but it's also important to bring other states along in this process. So right now I'm in Berlin. I'm going to be meeting with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, again, trying to push them to be on board with moving forward on a joint statement and supportive of that. I'm going to France as well to try to push this with the ministry there, with President Macron's team. Parliamentarians there obviously will have their own sway and their own audience. Influential, Lebanese who are donors to Macron or who are in circles of, communication and power, that they need to continue to raising these questions around fundamentally, is France's foreign policy vis-a-vis Lebanon sound? Is the continued investment in this political leadership sound? Or is it propping up a government that is perpetually undermining the rights of its citizens and fundamentally undermining security in the country and beyond? So I think there are serious questions here that should be put to President Macron and for others that continue to prop up the political establishment despite this horrific record of abuse. So I mentioned, some of the tools that we have. Obviously direct engagement is great. Influencing public opinion is also important. And we need to move forward really robustly together to try to advance this case, because the political considerations are significant and other priorities are taking precedence. So we're not acting in a vacuum.
شكرا لما. سؤال عم تسأل رين سوان عن شو ممكن ينعمل مع المحاكم بالدول اللي في ضحايا غير لبنانيين منها، لأنه نعرف إنه بعض الدول مثلا اللي ممكن يكون في اختصاص حتى لو الجريمة ما صارت على أرضها، طالما في ضحايا من هيدا البلد تعتبر الدول عندها اختصاص. هل في دعاوى على علمكم انرفعت وشو ممكن ينعمل بهيدا الإطار؟
Yes. So there are already 2 ongoing criminal cases in Germany and in France, because as you mentioned, their nationals were killed abroad. And so automatically the public prosecutors in the districts where those individuals were from launched criminal cases. However, they don't have the resources to conduct the investigations themselves. So they are waiting on the results of the Lebanese investigation so they can move forward with the proceedings. And this is where I think, again, an international investigation would be very useful, because they would be able to use the report by an international investigation to move forward with their proceedings. Because they're criminal proceedings, it means that they can issue arrest warrants, international arrest warrants against the officials or individuals that they find responsible. So those are very important pathways to justice. Kamen, as Lama mentioned, there's a civil case in the US against one of the companies that was involved in the procurement of the ammonium nitrate to Beirut. Now, after the whole debacle happened with Judge Awaidat and Tariq Bitar, Accountability Now, another NGO registered in Switzerland, has also said that they would be willing to work pro bono with dual nationals who want to file claims in other jurisdictions. And so far, I think they said that they've received dozens or more than a dozen interested people who have dual nationalities and who want to file claims in other jurisdictions. So there are multiple efforts on the international front to hold those responsible for the Beirut blast to account. I think the way that we could help is, if dual nationals, do encourage them to reach out to Accountability Now for pro bono legal support in filing these cases abroad.
شكرا آية. لما عم يسأل جوزيف شبيلي عن اليو ان رابورتور وإذا كيف ممكن يأثر دورهم بالقرار اللي بده يطلع عن لجنة تقصي الحقائق.
So the UN Special Rapporteurs, there are a number of mandates that, could investigate what happened on August 4. So there's the Special Rapporteur on human rights and toxics. Fundamentally, ammonium nitrate is a toxic material, which is, the mismanagement of which resulted in these human rights abuses. There's a UN Special Rapporteur on independence of lawyers and judges. We see that has been really undermined in the context of the investigation into the Beirut blast. These are just some examples. So these special procedures could initiate a correspondence with the Lebanese government, request to do a country visit, and undertake an investigation themselves, independent of Human Rights Council action. So that's something that we have requested at various times. We've tried to engage with different UN special rapporteurs, and something that I think is just another avenue that we need to continue to sort of have on the table and be considering as we move forward here. We are very well aware of the political limitations when it comes to advancing something at the Human Rights Council. And so it is important for us to keep thinking about how else we might advance accountability efforts, be it through criminal proceedings abroad or civil proceedings abroad, or these types of special procedures. So I think, and we also welcome ideas from others about what else we might be able to do in our capacities.
شكرا لما. آخر سؤال قبل ما أترك الكلمة الأخيرة لما وآية. فادي جلوان عم يسأل عن إذا متفقين إنه العرقلة السياسية هل ممكن المنظمتين، عم نحكي عن أمنستي وعن هيومن رايتس ووتش، يمارسوا ضغط من باب وجود نائبين متهمين أحدهم عضو بلجنة الإدارة والعدل. بعتقد يمكن هيدا عملتوه أنتم بشكل عمل بالتقارير أو غيره، بس هل في شيء ممكن ضغط ممكن يتمارس محليا بعد برأيكم آية؟
يعني ما بعرف شو بعد فينا نعمل محليا. So as we've discussed, we've continued to document the abuses, we've continued to talk about justice for the Beirut blast, we've continued to do advocacy abroad in order to get an international investigation, and in order to get countries on the record criticizing or condemning this political interference in the course of the domestic investigation. But again, we're civil society organizations. We can't hold the individuals responsible to account in a criminal proceeding. This needs to come through state institutions and through the judiciary. So the way that we continue to push for accountability locally for politicians involved in this is to continue pushing for reforms to the judicial system, and primarily the passage of a law on the independence of the judiciary.
Can I add one thing, Ali?
إيه أكيد. بس أنا كنت عم شوف بس إنه ران عم تسأل كانت علي. My question is more like what would be the best way to be in contact with the different international tribunals. هيدا كان السؤال، بلكي بنرجع له
I just wanted to raise one additional avenue that we are pressing for, which is the imposition of sanctions. So you may know that there are human rights and corruption sanctions regimes in many countries around the world, and they are used to try to advance human rights and to stop corruption. And we do believe that those that have culpability for the explosion should fall under these sanctions regimes. So I think this is another tool that we as Human Rights Watch are advocating for, that I think individuals in the diaspora can be pressing for with their own governments. In terms of the question about how to engage with international mechanisms, is that the question?
السؤال أكثر إذا في محاكمات عم تصير بدول مثل فرنسا وألمانيا، قديش ممكن نكون نحن اللي أخذت اختصاص، يعني قديش ممكن نكون نحن مواكبين لهذا الشيء، وممكن يكون في تواصل معهم to be in contact with the different international tribunals. شو ممكن ينعمل؟
I don't know if I really fully understand the question. I mean, in terms of presentation of evidence, or in terms of what exactly? Do you capture the question?
إذا فيك توضحي سؤالك.
Hello everyone. Yes, أنا قصدي إنه presentation of evidence.
Yeah, I think the different prosecutors' offices should have a mechanism for people to be able to submit evidence to them. I don't know off the top of my head sort of how it functions in France and in Germany, but they both should have formal procedures for people to be able to submit evidence on ongoing criminal cases.
And we can find this through embassies or we have to look it out?
Rin, if you want to follow up with me, I can try to dig into it for you.
Okay, thank you so much.
آية كلمة أخيرة لك وبعدين كلمة أخيرة لما إذا حابين تضيفوا شيء.
I mean, I think we've covered all of the points. The one thing though that I want to keep reiterating is we really should not let this crime of epic proportions pass without accountability. It's been 2.5 years, but it's still a priority for us as Amnesty International and for me personally as a Lebanese citizen and someone who was here when the blast happened. For years, we've been told, we've been made to believe that accountability is not possible, that we won't find the truth for whether it's political assassinations or a variety of other human rights violations. But I think we have to say, ما حتمرق هالمرة. Enough is enough. They, for decades have run the country completely without any kind of accountability, but this time won't pass. And we will do everything within our power using the domestic proceedings, Human Rights Council, the UN Special Rapporteurs. We will continue pressing for accountability through every avenue that we have.
شكرا آية، شكرا كثير. لما.
Thanks, Ali. I've been thinking a lot this week about accountability for the blast, particularly in the context of the earthquake that happened in Syria and in Turkey that we felt in Lebanon. And my immediate thoughts when we awoke to the earthquake was, is it an earthquake? Are we having, I was immediately triggered back to the explosion. And there is this feeling that there's nothing protecting us from this type of event happening again. And we will not have this trust, we will not have this security unless we are able to advance accountability and see some fundamental changes in government. So we are not just talking about the past. We are talking about the present, we're talking about the kind of future we want to build. And that's the significance of this. So I really just want to hold on to that as a guiding sort of star in terms of why we are so focused on accountability for the blast. Yes, it is for the lives that were lost and the destruction and the trauma, but it is also for all of us in terms of building the kind of future we want in our country.
شكرا كثير لما فقيه مديرة قسم الشرق الأوسط وشمال أفريقيا بهيومن رايتس ووتش. شكرا كثير آية مكتوب نائبة مدير قسم الشرق الأوسط بشمال أفريقيا بمنظمة العفو الدولية. بشكركم كثير للي كنتوا حاضرين. ومثل ما ختمت لما فقيه اليوم موضوع 4 آب ومعرفة الحقيقة والمحاسبة مسألة تتعلق بالدرجة الأولى لكل الشعب اللبناني، لأهالي الضحايا، ولكن أيضا للعدالة بلبنان، وكي لا يتكرر هذا الأمر وما نصير كمان إفلات من العقاب يتحول لقاعدة بهذا البلد. أهالي الضحايا يمكن هن بشكل مباشر معنيين ولازم يكونوا معنيين، ولكن هذه قضية وطنية جامعة، وربما مثل ما قالت لما قضية أيضا تتجاوز الحدود اللبنانية، ومنها فقط قضية لبنانية، إن كان بأضرارها وإن كان بتعقيداتها وإن كان بتبعاتها من خلال المواد وغيره. أنا باسم فريق كلنا إرادة بنشكركم على حضوركم، بنشكر لما فقيه وآية مجدوب مجددا، وإلى لقاءات مقبلة بسلسلة الندوات حول السياسات العامة اللي بتنظمها كلنا إرادة. يعطيكم ألف عافية وتصبحوا على ألف خير.